Okay, and we've got a... I'm going to switch on my mic off after this. And we are live.
Okay, we're live, hooray. Welcome everyone who's with us tonight, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm doing, as we all are, my best to make my home space look a little bit fancier with some fairy lights. And this is going to be um, a different literature night to what we're all used to, because we're in each other's spaces, which I think is yeah, something quite special and quite beautiful. There's, yeah, that intimacy that we're all sharing with each other. So I have um, I've been lucky enough to be working with this group of writers since January. And then March came and everything changed. And we had managed to meet each other a couple of times. And there are many more people in the group who couldn't be with us tonight as well, for various reasons. But we've managed to kind of keep connected online, and the writers that you're going to hear from tonight are all very different from each other, actually, in terms of the textures and the poetry and the flavors of what they're writing, and all really pushed themselves. We've been working together, yeah, since January, and they've all been just developing and developing and developing. You're going to hear some live readings. You're going to see some filmed work, and I don't want to say too much more about it. But anyway, you're in for a huge treat. Um, my name is Mish. I publish under the name Michelle Green, and yeah, welcome. I'm also going to be reading some excerpts of work from the Commonword Archive. So Keena's going to tell you more about the Commonword Archive in a moment, but what you need to know about it right now is this. Commonword turned 40 last year. They are a very good Manchester writer development organization that has been working class led right from the start. That's something that's really clear in when I started looking through some of their archive materials. And that's something that just sets my heart on fire. And another thing that became very clear very quickly as well is that there were so this word that Kimberly Crenshaw gave us, intersectionality, like that's the spirit of that word before she coined that word, and then many years later, before the rest of us learned about her word, that was happening. It was in action in many places. Of course it was. And one of the places it was in action in, that crossing of different life experience points that exist within each person. You can see that in the Commonword Archive. It's really interesting to me for that reason. And yeah, I'm going to share a little bit. I'm going to share a little bit of work with you from the archive today. Also, as we are in our little cozy Zoom room and you're watching on Facebook, if you have questions, you can write those in the comments under the Facebook stream, and Hina's going to be keeping an eye on that, and we can get to that later. Do I need to tell you anything else? I don't think I do. Get yourselves a cup of tea if you haven't already. And I am going to start by reading you General Strike. So this is a letter that's part of the Commonword Archive. And this was written in the 80s. I'm just going to read this to you. It feels like right now, more than ever, we need to know our histories. We need to know our histories as marginalized people. So whether that's because of being trans that we're marginalized, being working class, being people of color, being immigrants, all of us who are being marginalized in one way or multiple ways, we need to know about our histories and the people who've tried to make things right for us in the past. Let me read to you the general strike. This is by Mr. B.J. Hill. And he wrote this letter in response to a request for information about the general strike by someone who actually experienced it. So when he wrote this, he was 74. He was the youngest of a family of 13, and he was living in Hume. So here it is. Dear Ms. Gale, I was surprised to read in the Manchester Evening News that you'd been unable to contact anyone that had memories of the 1926 general strike. As a 73-year-old senior citizen who remembers very vividly how it affected my young life, perhaps the following may shed some light on the matter. I left school when 13 years of age to work in a pawn shop for 8 shillings a week. My job was to obtain the keys from the local police shop in Bellevue Street, now the British Legion Club, and then dash to the shop for the manager to open up. There was always a big queue on Monday mornings, and woe betide me if we didn't open up at 7 a.m. Pledges such as suits, boots, costumes, etc. were taken out at weekends for one day's sartorial splendor, and were the first things to be popped, and cries of, "Hurry up, you little so-and-so, he's waiting for his dinner money," were mild compared to some. It was late in 1918. The Great War was soon to be over, and industry was sacking men and women left and right. And my few months at the pawn shop revealed to me the many hardships and poverty unemployment brought. I had 3 sisters doing war work on the Great Central Railway, and my eldest sister got me a job on the railway as I'd reached the manly age of 14, celebrated by my mother buying me a new suit, my first pair of long trousers. Talk about walk tall, as I escorted my 2 other sisters to the Palace Theatre as a treat. They had both lost their husbands, killed at Dardanelles battle thanks to Churchill and his blundering. So here I was, working on a mainline signal box for £1 for a 48-hour week as a train register boy. You entered all trains and times as they passed your section, and I loved every minute of it. The signalman to whom I was attached was a bearded Tom Griffiths, a Methodist lay preacher and city councillor who used to rant and rave about the injustices of the capitalist system. And as I was with him for 4 years, he had me at it, tub thumping. Bear with me. I am coming to the general strike and what it did for me. By 1926, I'd left the signal box. For at 20 years of age, I became an adult and was made a station porter for £1.15 per week. I was on the late shift, finishing at 11:30 p.m., and at midnight, the general strike began. What worried me the most was the station cat, who was about to have her umpteenth lot of kittens. And as she was a real station cat, the station was her castle, and many a dog had fled yelping during her pregnancies. Also, 4 churns of milk had arrived from Roseley on the last train, a regular thing to happen, but with Kitty locked up in the cozy and warm porter's room, as I locked the station gates, I remember thinking Kitty and her brood will be okay for milk. The pickets were already at the station entrance, watching me lock up. And just as I made to get on my bike, I was handed a picket armband and told I would be relieved at 6 a.m. the following morning. I was there when the horse-drawn milk float drew up. Now this chap was built like a tank. I told him he couldn't get his milk as we were on strike and the station was locked up. I was expecting the roof to fall in, but all he said was he'd come back, and as he turned the horse around, he said, "Give Kitty some milk out of the small churn." He always had a tidbit for her. The time, 5 o'clock in the morning of the first day of the general strike, and as the clip-clop of the horse's hooves and the rumbling iron-rimmed wheels died away, I suddenly realized how still and quiet it had become. No factory hooters or clanging tram cars. It was the stillness of a Sunday morning 100-fold. As I walked wheeling my bike home, the streets were empty. No shops lit for early trade. It was ghostly, a graveyard, which it was to become, of jobs and hopes, dreams and human endeavors. My heavy tread seemed out of place in such silence, so I mounted my bike for the rest of the way. When I joined the railway, I was told I had a job for life, which I had for the next 50 years. There was a large number of neighbor children of my age. How they envied me my job as one year led to another and still no work. The general strike affected lives so deeply that the scars are still there after all these years. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin was spoken of on the telly the other evening. And the way I went on about the bastard, my family asked me if I was losing my marbles. I could sing a bit in those days, and I used to join the pathetic little groups of Welsh miners who had to resort to begging in the streets, singing their hearts out in neighborhoods that had nothing to give. It was nearly 2 years before I went back on full time. Some of my mates never got back. When the strike was over, this was how we had to work. On Sundays, with few trains running, sign on, open station for 10 minutes before train due, 10 minutes later, sign off on duty 20 minutes. This went on until 11 p.m. when finished. Total hours to be paid for, 6 hours, 20 minutes. For a day lasting from 5:30 a.m. until 11 p.m., a total of 17 hours and 30 minutes. And we were glad of it. Kitty had her kittens. The milk churns had to be emptied in a hole we dug. The students whom I cursed the memory of tried to play trains. What a mess they left with their strike-breaking efforts. Because there was little to do when we returned to work. One of the jobs we had to do was tidy up the mess. And two of us were sent to clean the very signal box where I started my railway life. How I loved to polish the levers and instruments, scrub and shine. Two students had manned this place, and the sight that greeted us made us vomit. Buckets used as toilets, dozens and dozens of beer bottles, empty of course, foul bedding, stale and rotting food, and a beautiful Atlantic-type steam locomotive off the rails and on its side, wrecked. These engines were the pride of all of us. We nicknamed them Jersey Lilies, after the beautiful Lily Langtree. This was an unpardonable sin, and here I am living through it all again, though half a century ago. I don't know if my ramblings are anything like what you want, but it has done me good to hammer this out with one finger, although I'm getting dirty looks from my family, as my clicking is spoiling the TV programs for them. Best of luck with your research about the general strike. Yours, Mr. B.J. Hill. So I wanted to invite Hina to tell you a little bit more about the archive project, of which trans rights is one part. Hina works at Commonword and has been very busy reading, organizing, filing, discovering all of this incredible work that has been that's been saved at Commonword over the last 40 years. So yeah, Hina, did you want to say a little bit about your work and what you've been doing with the archive and what's to come as well?
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Mish.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's here today, and thank you for all the people who are in the trans rights group. My name is Hina Patel, and I'm the coordinator of the Commonword Archive project. Commonword's actually been going for a little bit longer than 40 years. It's been going since 1977. And since then, we've been helping new writers in Manchester and the Northwest, particularly marginalised writers. And how have we done that? We've done so many different things. Here's just a few of them. We give people a platform, the experience of being published and of performing, and we encourage writer communities to form because writing can be damn lonely. And if they accept the challenge, we encourage writers to take risks and to be experimental. And, I know how easy it is to be pigeonholed, especially if you're, marginalized, are you just a gay writer or a disabled writer or a woman writer? So yeah, we want people to take those risks. Now, the archive project has been a way of sharing Commonword's history with the rest of the world. And showcases like this tonight, they add to the history as well. So just a bit of that is I've created a website for the archive, and I'd encourage you to look at it. You can find it at commonwordarchive.org. I'll put that in the comments later if I can. And you can find out there about the writers that we've helped over the years. And I hope that you will see that there is no one way to be a writer. And you might also be interested in the work by lesbian and gay writers from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And just to say that terms like bisexual, trans, non binary, intersex, they weren't used at the time, but I hope that people will be able to see here in 2020 that you're part of a long history of struggle. And I hope that that will give you, whoever's watching as well, the strength to go on, or if you're writers, the strength to go on writing and resisting. So yes, thank you all, people who've been in the trans rights group. Thank you for being part of Commonword's history. And congratulations on this step of your writer journey. And on behalf of Commonword, I'd like to say that I'm really proud of what you've all achieved in the past few months. And just quickly to say what's happening in the future, we're going to carry on kind of developing, supporting marginalised writers and sharing that archive and, encouraging people to write. And yeah, that's all I can say really. So yeah, thank you very much. And thanks again to everyone. Really happy with the work that I've seen. So you're all in for a treat.
Thank you so much, Hina. And yeah, I just want to echo what you're saying about knowing that we come from long histories as writers and as people, and I think it's something really important to know, especially right now, where our world, in this country, certainly things feel like they're getting more. There's a sense of regression in so many ways, and something that I found personally so fortifying about being able to work with the writers in this group, and what became a very intimate group, is of trans and non-binary writers who are writing in very different forms and with different focuses. It feels like right now, more than it has been for a long time, we need to make that space and claim that space to speak for ourselves, because there are so many who do not care and cherish us, who want to speak over us. So yeah, I just I feel quite emotional. Yeah, I feel quite emotional at this tonight, and I'm just so it really I think that we can share strength, and we can draw strength from each other's words and from each other's experiences and histories and fictions and creativity and all of that. Those things are, art is not a decoration. I mean, decorations are decorations. Art and writing and literature is this kind of stuff that can keep you alive, right? It can be one of the things that fortifies you, and that gives you power, and through which you find your power. And I'm just feeling that more than ever. So I'm not going to talk any longer about the group. I want you to just hear. I want you to hear some of the work that they've created. I want to introduce our first reader. So Mika is a non-binary writer and a freelance curator living in Manchester. They have had a long passion for reading, but only very recently have given themselves permission to write. I am so glad you've given yourself permission. Oh my gosh, yes. Their work explores the beautiful complicatedness of queer lives in contemporary settings. Last month, they participated as a finalist in the David Haim Open Day for Underrepresented Writers. It is my huge pleasure to introduce you to Mika, and I believe we have some film to go along with Mika's live reading. So I'm going to turn my video off. And can you please share the film?
I just wanted to say a few words before I start, actually. Just thank you to Mish and to Commonword for these workshops. It's been a really supportive space. And this is a piece that I wrote in response to lockdown and to kind of isolation and social media in lockdown. So it's called The Anniversary. They need new trainers, Sam thinks, as they tie the laces. A hole has appeared, opening and closing like the mouth of a fish. It is 2 weeks since they last left the house. Pushing aside the pile of junk mail, Sam opens the door, shutting it behind them. It is hot outside. The sun reflects off the windows, sending bursts of white light across Sam's vision. They squint, shading their eyes with a hand. A phalanx of bins guards the ginnel leading to the alley at the back. Rain has rusted the lock on the gate to the yard. Sam spits on the key. It turns. They wheel their bike out into the street. The tires are low, but the pump is missing. Mounting the saddle, they push themselves off down the road. Everything appears new. The leaves of the lime trees are shiny with sap. Blossom, the colour of candy floss, is collected by the breeze in great drifts that swirl across the road. Gaining speed, the cool air reaches under Sam's shirt, and something deep inside is released, like the catch on a door. A waft of weed reminds Sam of summers spent in Alexandra Park. They would go after work to drink beers on the bank overlooking the pond. Sometimes Sam's friends would join them. When Jake came, he would skin up, passing the joint around between swigs of beer. An argument escapes through a first-floor window into the street below. The voices are thick with anger, and Sam admires their texture. Further down on the patch of grass outside the flats, 3 women wearing sunglasses and vest tops are seated in plastic chairs. Another woman has stopped to talk, one hand resting on her hip, as the other gently rocks a pushchair back and forth. It came from China, that's what I heard. Terrible business. Well, I'm enjoying it. You'd be happy if the world was about to end. The woman in yellow slaps her thigh, laughing, and Sam can't help but smile as the voices fade. It was in the park that they first got together, Sam and Jake. Dusk fell, and the park emptied, but they stayed. It was August, and the nights were getting cooler. Jake put his arm around Sam, and in that same motion, they kissed. Sam passes the 2 grocery shops side by side on Clarendon Road. There is a man in a white chemise inspecting the stalls outside. He is wearing a blue mask, his eyes fixed in concentration, and for a moment the man is a surgeon, performing a delicate operation with the courgette in his hand. The next few streets are almost deserted. A long-haired kid on a skateboard carves down the empty road. In Chiltern, the cafes and shops are shuttered. A figure waits at a bus stop. gazing toward the horizon, willing the 85 to appear from around the corner. A line of people wraps itself around the supermarket. They are dressed in shorts and sunglasses as though they are on holiday. The security guard directs the first few into the store before holding up a hand. Sam turns left at the lights into tree-shaded streets of three-storied Victorian houses fronted by well-tended gardens. Stone pillars etched with grand-sounding names stand either side of paths leading to the wooden porches that shelter freshly painted doors. Behind those doors, Sam imagines tiled hallways and cream-carpeted rooms, wooden furniture, and framed portraits of golden-haired children. A well-fed cat walks idly into the extended kitchen. A woman presses a phone between her ear and her shoulder as she pours out a glass of wine on the marble-topped counter. She walks through the open French windows to the decking that fringes the generous lawn, where a child on a climbing frame calls, "Mum, watch this." The thin man with tortoiseshell glasses sitting at the patio table glances up from his novel as the woman places her hand over the receiver and mouths, "It's your mother." The man takes a sip from his glass. Apparently disinterested, he returns his gaze to the page, but he has lost the thread of the story. Sam waits at the lights. The road here is busier, and they wonder where all the people could be going in their cars. They would like to ban cars. They know this is unfair. Some people would be housebound without one. Where would you draw the line? What about the executives who commute in from Cheshire? Yes, Sam would ban them. The lights change. On Beach Road, a queue of people stand conscientiously distant from one another outside the delicatessen. Passing the Greene, Sam turns into the car park, avoiding the puddles from yesterday's rain. They lock their bike to one of the stands. A family with a dog is struggling to stow a pushchair into their car. The dog reminds Sam of the Labrador they had growing up, of long walks through the fields along unfamiliar paths. It was as though Sam wanted to get lost, to never be found. They leave their bike for the woods, taking the path that follows the stream. Sam gives a wide berth to a couple walking hand in hand towards them. The couple smile as they pass, but something sharp digs into Sam, like a drawing pin underfoot. It is the same feeling they had this morning scrolling through Facebook when they came across a picture of Jake. He was standing outside a house, his arms wrapped around the waist of someone Sam didn't recognize. They were both smiling. A tiny bird flits across the path, landing on a fallen tree. Sam pauses. The bird tilts its head and touches its tail to the branch up and down, as if to communicate a secret message. And when it flies off, the image of Jake and his lover are gone. Sam follows the path until they reach the lake. Curtains of foliage are pulled back to reveal its glittering surface scalloped by the breeze. They walk to the edge of a wooden platform where the fishermen camp out with flasks of tea. On the other side of the lake, Sam can see the pale bellies of upturned boats all in a row beside the jetty. Last summer, they took Jake swimming there, willing each other to jump off the end. You pay a $5 for the lifeguards when you sign in. They give you a wristband with a number on. So if you drown, we know who you are, said the guy, handing them out. Sam wanted to join the kids swimming from the slipway on the other side of the boathouse. There were no wristbands or lifeguards or fees. Sam assumed they could both swim as well as each other, but they quickly realized their mistake. The two of them set off on a circuit around the three orange buoys, but when they reached the second, furthest from the shore, Jake's energy was sapping. He became anxious, his strokes less effective. Sam swam next to him, talking to him all the while, trying to distract him from the cold, glad for the lifeguards after all. When eventually they reached the jetty, Jake hauled himself out, exhausted. Sam scans the water below for fish. New shoots pierce up through the silt like spears. A coot swims out from the rushes, trailing 5 chicks. They dart furiously this way and that, picking off insects from the water's surface. Then Sam is undressing themselves. They don't have a towel or a costume, but it's as though the lake has a power over them. They fold their clothes in a pile next to their trainers until they are standing naked. They step down from the platform into the water, one foot then the other, sinking into the mud. Sam adjusts to the cold before wading further in. They pause, waiting for the sun to emerge from behind a cloud, the water lapping at their waist. It was only when Jake left that Sam stopped drinking, a year ago today. Then the water catches fire, ablaze with the sun's last rays. Sam traces the surface with their hands. Looking ahead, they dive in.
Micah, thank you so much. It's really beautiful to hear you read that after reading it from a screen. Yeah. There's lots of moments of pause in many of the things you will hear tonight, and moments of reflection and moments of change. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. I want to read you a really short two poems from the archive that sort of touch on something that Hina mentioned about looking for ourselves in records and in creative records of the past, particularly when our language has changed so much. When you don't have words to speak about your experiences, it's very difficult to frame those, and sometimes difficult to recognize those, right? And looking back through the archive materials, I can see little hints of queer writers, and of writers who experience their gender in a way other than what they have been taught to gravitate towards, who may or may not, had they been at that point of their life right now, consider themselves to be non-binary or to be trans. But those little moments, when you're used to your histories being erased, you look for the traces, right? So Hina has been studying the archive very carefully, and she's been pulling out some of those traces. So I want to read you two poems. This one is called The Cottage, and it's by a writer called Chris Britton. The Cottage. Don't go in there, friend. There's a copper on the seat. If you go in there, friend, don't tell him he's sweet. Stay out here, friend, till he goes back on his beat. The paddy wagon's coming, friend, and now you're nicked on your feet. Now you're in court, friend. The judge says it's a treat to send you to prison, friend, for telling him he's sweet. In prison, friend, they'll treat you rough. It's no good acting straight and pretending to be tough. 6 months in prison, friend, is more than enough. And the second poem I'm going to read for you is by a writer called Celia Roberts. I should have mentioned the image you're looking at right now is one of the covers of Voices magazine that Commonword published way back in the 70s for 40p. What a bargain. A gorgeous artwork. The covers are, so we're sharing a couple of them with you tonight. So this is Beauty Counter Encounter by Celia Roberts. I feel like a man when I'm with you, with your platinum blonde hair and scarlet dipped fingers. I sit a wedge-shaped block with little blackcurrant eyes. I feel I'm in drag when I'm with you, with your new dress, yielding, and every curve displayed discreetly. My voice sounds like the mud you churn up with your stiletto heels. I feel like I'm a dog when I'm with you, with your half smiles bestowed, and your oh so simples glittering and stalking, cutting out my sunlight. I feel like I'm a man when I'm with you. Okay. I would like to introduce you to another one of the trans rights writers. So you are going to hear from Alma. Alma is a creative thinker, a writer, and an artist, and they are interested in exploring queer intimacy in their prose and writing about sexual encounters. This is their first time sharing their fiction with a wide audience. And you can find them on Instagram at this_is_Alma and on Twitter at this_is_Alma. Okay. Alma, you're there. Hooray. I'm going to turn my video off and listen to your story.
I would just like to take a moment to thank Mish for being an incredible person while running this incredible. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting a bit nervous. This workshop, and I want to thank Commonword for giving every one of us the chance to do it. And I'm just going to read. So my story is called The Rune on the Variegated Elm. In the runic alphabet, algae represents good omens. Runes are simple lines that can be drawn by anyone. They can also be carved onto objects, living creatures as well, although I haven't carved it onto any animal. Not yet, at least. But I did carve algae on a variegated elm when I was younger. The odd thing is that the rune I had meant to draw and use for my spell was not supposed to help the tree grow beautifully long branches with thick foliage. Unintentionally, I had drawn the rune upside down, and by doing so, the rune was going to turn the tree into ashes. Without meaning to, I had carved onto the variegated elm a symbol that carried with it the shadow of ill omen. I wanted to see it blossom under the early spring sun, to grow branches long enough to reach for the clouds and greet them with a caress. Would I have to witness the tree slowly die in front of my eyes instead? My aunt is older than my mother. She has been married twice, divorced just as many. She's what some would call a spinster, a money-eater. Like in Sylvia Plath's Ariel, my aunt has always raised with her red hair an 8-man-like air. She has always been the kind of person who knows what she wants and how to get it. Other than difference in age, there's also a massive difference in what life offered to my mother and my aunt. They have both been used to luxury since childhood. My grandfather used to work at a post office and earn a considerable amount of money to spoil them with. My grandmother used to own a shop, and she sold, amongst other items, dresses. My mother and my aunt would help her run the business from a very early age. My grandmother allowed them to sneak into storage to try on some of the newly delivered gowns. They would spend hours rummaging through the garments until they had found the perfect ones. They would wear them, put their favorite tunes in the record player, and dance around, imagining themselves princesses attending a marvelous ball. When my grandfather would complain about the giggles coming from the storage room, my grandmother shushed him. Unlike my aunt, my mother has never been hypnotized by the treasures sparkling behind the glossy windows of upper-class mansions. When my aunt met her second husband, the Count, she crowned her childhood dream of becoming a real-life princess. By marrying the Count, my aunt earned the title of Countess. She lived in the Count's mansion, surrounded by hectares of pine trees in the center of Italy for many years. During that period of time, she experienced the life of a real noblewoman. She became the matron of his mansion, and she got accustomed to giving orders to everyone around her. Next to the mansion, there was a tiny house, where an old man and an old woman, the servants, lived. They had to put up with every silly order that the countess gave them. My aunt grew accustomed to a reality that my mother, who married my father, that owns no noble titles, would never experience in a life. Slowly, as the years went by, my aunt became the reason for which I realized that fairy tales are not meant to become reality. Like in Beauty and the Beast, someone was hit by a curse. In the Disney version of the fairy tale, Princess Belle doesn't undergo any transformation. My aunt, instead, went through some sort of Kafkian metamorphosis. She started to transform into a ferocious beast. With the economic stability the Count provided her with, my aunt was ready to slay as many adversaries' throats as necessary for her to reach the highest steps on the social ladder. My aunt became the beast in her own narrative, some sort of peacock with an unnecessary need to flaunt her tail to impress the onlookers. As a consequence of her acquired noble title, my aunt would act differently around her family members too. I remember how I hated when she would come to visit us. She would treat me as one of her servants. She always demanded for things to be done her way, otherwise she would complain endlessly. My mother had to put up with my aunt criticizing her because she believed that she wasn't raising me in the proper way. I was too young then to understand that the reason why she criticized her was because she was too afraid of how I was breaking certain gender norms, norms that she liked to be kept in place in a utopic vision of the world. Whenever she would catch me playing with dolls, she would snatch them away from my hands and hide them from me. I was too young to understand that she was nothing else but a transphobic and homophobic snob. My mother has never found the strength to put her foot down with her older sister. My aunt has always felt like she could exert her older siblings' rights against her. I never liked her attitude. It reminded me of my older brothers towards me. It pained me to see my mother being bullied by my aunt, and I felt so powerless. I was just a child. How could I stop my aunt from being the villain in my life? When my aunt was still married to the Count, her and my mother decided to buy a summer house for the whole family to share. The first summer we spent in that house, my aunt and my mother went hunting for the perfect tree to plant in the middle of the big garden on the property. I decided to go with them because I imagined how the tree hunting trip would have unfolded. My aunt would have exerted her older siblings' rights over my mother, and she wouldn't have found the force to fight back and face Auntie Beast. On that day, my mum surprised me. She stood her ground against her older sister, and she was the one who chose the tree to bring back home. My aunt agreed to split the cost of it, even though she kept blubbering about how the tree my mum had chosen was never going to grow, to give the spot of grass underneath it a shadow big enough to shelter us from the rays of the August sun. The tree my mum chose was beautiful to my eyes. Its trunk was thin and light beige. On its spindly branches there were few light green leaves with yellowish dots all over. It was called a variegated elm. When we got back to the summer house, my dad was ordered by my aunt to dig a hole deep enough for the tree's roots to prosper underneath the grass. Whilst he was taking care of the tree, my aunt would supervise his work, sipping iced lemon water and smoking cigarettes. My mother was busy in the kitchen, taking care of the dinner, as my aunt expected her to. Blessed by my tender age, I took advantage of it to just sit around and observe grown-ups performing their assigned tasks. That summer was almost coming to an end, and so was the strength that my mother had conjured to battle her beastly sister. The night before we left the summer house to go back to the big city's traffic and pollution, we had a family dinner. While dessert was being served, my mother and my aunt engaged in a massive argument. My aunt was criticizing my mother because I hadn't eaten anything throughout the entire dinner. Even though we shared angsty looks, neither my brother nor I were old enough to speak against the words of a grown-up, and my two cousins were too selfish to care enough to stop their mother from being horrible to mine. The Count himself was too busy sparking up one of his Cuban cigars to say anything. I remember how my dad was holding my mom's hand tightly. My aunt began shouting at my mother, telling her that she should bring me to see a psychiatrist because she was convinced I suffered from an eating disorder. My mother tried to counterattack by saying that my aunt out of everyone, was the last person who could talk about eating disorders. The relationship that exists between my cousins and food is as damaged as the one that exists between them and my aunt. My aunt began shouting louder than ever before, and my mother broke into tears. I saw the pain in her eyes when I met her gaze, and I could hear the hurt in her cries. When I moved my gaze to meet my aunt's, her head was shaking from side to side. You bring dishonor to your family. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? I remember the weird sensation of that moment. I could feel my body being there, but it felt like my mind wasn't. I had registered what she had just said to me, but I couldn't find the strength within myself to respond to her mean words with wittier ones. What amazes me the most about members of the same families is how certain character traits are passed from one person to another. My cousins inherited my aunt's arrogance, and my brother and I inherited my mother's kindness. There is something else I inherited, not from my mother, not from my father, but from the moon herself. When everyone went to their rooms, I couldn't fall asleep. One thing that my father taught me is the magic that one can find in words, the beauty in the music that syllables can create when read out loud. So, I picked up Harris's Rune Marks, the book I was reading that summer. I opened it on the page with the explanation of the meanings of some of the letters from the runic alphabet. Algi's was amongst them. It spoke to me, that one rune. I could hear its whispering voice in my head. It was the one I could use to set the record straight, once and for all. This was my occasion to revenge my mother, and somehow, myself. After all, no kid likes being considered the black sheep of the family. My brother and I were given a room on the summer house's ground floor with a bunk bed to share. I had learned to interpret his breathing patterns. I could tell when he was awake and when he wasn't. Thankfully, that last summer night, his breathing was deep and harmonious. I swiftly climbed down the metal ladder, opened the bedroom door, and went into the kitchen to grab a knife. I twisted the keys in the front door and walked out in the garden. The grass brushed crisply under my naked feet. A gentle breeze caressed my bare arms and legs. I looked up in the sky and the moon was shining like a pearl found only at the bottom of the sea. I sat down in front of the tree and whispered in the darkness for the moon's blessing. I invoke thee, O Luna. I beg you to help me performing this protective ritual. I picked up the knife and drew algaes on the trunk of the variegated elm that my dad had planted earlier on in the day. By carving algaes on this tree, I ask you, O Luna, to bless it with prosperity. I beg you to make it grow and flourish. Make the sight of its long, thick branches prove to my arrogant aunt that kindness is the real answer to any problem. I beg thee, O Luna, I don't want to see my mother cry like that ever again. I closed my eyes and whispered the secret words 3 times. When I opened them again, I saw algae on the trunk glimmering with an iridescent light of its own. When I woke up the next morning, my aunt, the count, and my cousins had already left. It was just me, my parents, and my brother. After breakfast, I spent the last hours of my summer under the thin shadow of the variegated elm in the middle of the garden. My mother joined me and she sat next to me. I'm sorry, Mum, I said, looking at her. Sorry about what? About Auntie Beast. She's always so mean to you. Oh, baby, she said, caressing my cheek. You don't need to worry about her. Her words can reach in my thick skin. She smiled. I did too, even though her cries from the previous evening still echoed loudly in my head. I didn't see my aunt, the count, and my 2 cousins for many years after that summer. I will never know if it's because of the big argument that she and my mother had on our last family supper. I don't know if it's because my aunt divorced the count and started traveling around the world, forcing my cousins to move with her, as if they were just chess pieces on a board. I don't know if it's because of the reversed algae I drew on the trunk of the variegated elm. I don't know if it's because my mother finally found the strength to become an Amazonian warrior princess and cut off any ties to her sister. Maybe I will never know, and that's fine. I still visit the summer house every now and then. My parents are too old to travel for so many hours, My aunt died from depression, as my grandfather did. One of my cousins is living in Luxembourg, and the other one can't afford the petrol to reach the summer house. My brother lives happily in the US with his bleach blonde wife, their 3 loud kids, and their rescue dog. I am the only one who can spend summers in this house. The variegated elm is still standing in the middle of the garden. Whenever I come here, I stay awake at night and wait for the moon to shine bright in the night summer sky. I stand in front of the variegated elm, and with my eyes closed, I search the trunk for algae. When I drew this rune, I was nothing more than a child, hoping for magic to be more than just something you can find flipping the pages of books. Today, I'm a witch who's learned that what really matters when casting spells is the purity of your intentions behind them. I have learned that even though you might draw a rune upside down, if your intentions aren't evil, nothing bad will ever happen. Thank you.
That is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me read and giving me this opportunity.
It's such a treat to get to hear you read that out loud. And it feels really special to be hearing it right now as well. And it reminds me of, I don't know who it was who said this. It reminds me of that quote, "We are the children of the witches that you couldn't kill."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's really beautiful work. And I really like how you play with fairy tales and magic and yeah, thank you so much, Alma. I got the chills. Okay. I'm going to introduce you to our next reader, who has actually created a short film for you. So you might have seen her doing other things about town. She does a lot of things. So Vivian Holmes is a 25-year-old multidisciplinary / indecisive artist living in Manchester. She is a DIY musician, a DJ, an author, and a game developer, along with several other now forgotten ambitions. Everything she writes ends up being about loneliness with a fragment of hope for a better world. Yes. She co-organizes Fatty Acid as part of the Partisan Collective. Her band's live demo can be found at, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, and I'm so sorry, Vivian, Ether Mech or Ether Mech. I'm going to spell that for you. ETHERMECH, all one word, .bandcamp.com. So go and listen to her band's live demo. And she has an upcoming short story in Speculative Masculinities, which is a queer anthology that will be coming out with Galley Books at the end of the year. Sounds really interesting. So yeah, Speculative Masculinities. I would like to read that. Okay, I'm going to ask if we can bring up Vivian's film, and then as soon as it is started, I will stop my video so you've got a nice clean feed. And thank you everyone in the audience for bearing with us as we work out all of this new technological stuff.
Hi, Mish. Just bear with me. I'm just trying to optimize the video for sound and for video. I wasn't able to do it while you were doing your lovely intro, much as I tried. So please bear with me. We won't be long.
No worries. That's fine.
Okay. Let's have a look.
I should say, while we're given a gap, I'll just say, yeah, thanks so much to Mish and Mika and Alma for sharing what you've already. It was fantastic. This whole process has been amazing and just really lovely to write in this sort of setting. It's just been relaxed but sort of very directed in a really nice way. And yeah, it's just been lovely, and it's just great to finally share all of this with the world. Hello, world.
Indeed. And thank you. You're so welcome. And it has been really nice, I think, in this time when we've all been isolated so much from one another. It's just felt like it certainly has for me, felt like a real boon, actually, to connect in this way. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
here it is.
Thank
I'm going to
God.
turn my video off. Thank you so much, Vivian. Let's watch and listen.
The EM trucks weren't working, and they hadn't been for the last month. The mine wouldn't reach the systems covered by the engineering teams for another 70 days. Because of this, travel up and down the Vega pits had been minimized, so not to lose time and efficiency. What this meant in practice, in the present moment, was that Eden had been down the mine for 20 hours, with 2 lanterns, a head torch, and a few drones to assist with the supervision of the extraction droids. She'd started pretending to be some mythical glowing snake, swirling the lantern in a looping S shape, projecting dances and patterns on the laser-cut walls, with the occasional drone sticking bunny ears behind another to liven things up. It was hard to remember they weren't a lie, that each of these little games was just the side project of some bored programmer, whether to add some sort of parental attachment to encourage people to take better care of them, or just to creep out whichever poor mine worker got stuck down here with no lights on. Bastard. She set the one lamp to make big circles, and then the other to swing back and forth like a pendulum, while the drones danced in front, their shadows growing and shrinking in a couple of directions against the big grey canvas of the pit. She watched them for a minute, hand on a valve, keeping it steady until it evened out. And she joined them in the dance, spinning and throwing herself around space. She was in space, with all these little robots. She'd read histories about mining, what a dangerous thing it had been. Once upon a time they actually sent children down small holes, their little hands grabbing up the coal or diamonds or whatever carbon they liked back then. They had all these little terms and tricks, seams and canaries. Even then they found a way to humanize the great slabs, or inject some sort of meaning. They'd always done it, she with her big works of light sculpture, them with their veins of diamonds. It was beautiful, the deep dark yielding hidden secrets that could be molded into batteries or earrings, but she felt that it was always much more interesting as an abyss. Even as this asteroid flung itself around the galaxy, it was more inert than anything. But the world was so vast. The universe, even. Humans had stared at the sky back on Terra for years, dreaming of exploring the heavens, the aurora, whatever they saw up there. And then they had managed it. And now here she was, ripping through space. The galactic population orders of magnitude higher than Terra was at its peak. Still felt boring, though. That was the other thing about being this far down into the mine, tearing through the heavens in a deep pit. The dials and meters and graphs on screens shifted a little, but all within what was expected. The big devil was battling through the walls here, the prime droid. She was no newbie, for sure, but the labor of the huge automaton still entranced her. She stared up at it, covered in debris, formerly black splotches, now its entire pelt, snarling and chewing the wall. "O great behemoth, O Lucifer, what do you seek, my infernal lord?" Her shouts echoed back with a metallic twang, and the drones sang back to her, whirring in sine waves. The prime droid, however, did not reply. While the little drones had their quirks, such shapery was not permitted for high-responsibility work like the prime. Just crunched and munched, rooting for gems. Eventually, there was a crackle from the radio, telling her it was time to go back up. It felt odd. It hadn't been too long. She pocketed the screwdriver she'd been admiring all shift and stepped to the lift. waving to the prime droid in passing. It kept drilling, scraping, scanning, and did not wave back. The old lift was only really bad because of how slow it was. It was steady and quiet and did its job, but she had a few dozen kilometers to go, so it'd be a while still. The drones below remained, still waving their lights back and forth, making those same little patterns on the wall. It'd be a treat for whoever was next. Cresta? Linnaeus? One of them. They were only names on a list. That bunch of the 4th rotation. The 2nd rotation thought the same about her. Just the name on the list. It's a nice sort of circle. What did they think she was like? Eden Ravda was a nice name. Simple and with a nice rhythm. But on a list with the others, next to Nail and Co., it was soft. Softer than she actually was. Who really was like their name, though? Linnaeus was probably not as boring as their name suggested, but maybe they were? It was equally, if not more unlikely, that nobody in the group filled some amount of nominative determinism. She had been reading a novel, an old classic, about swords and dragons. She always preferred it to anything too modern or science fiction-y. Why imagine faster-than-light travel when you can imagine a magic spell to get you there in an instant? A great witch who knows the folds of the universe like the ins and outs of her inventions of eyes and words and bark. Even if the lights weren't broken, the book was up top by her bed, so to pass the time she tried to remember it all. The arcs of the bladesmith, the cobbler's daughter, the xenophile with eyes like sapphires, the great jewel on the bells, and the 7 altars for 7 blossoms. That felt contrived, like the author had wanted to create one of those epic tales. She didn't know much about mythology, but figured it was probably some obscure reference. Maybe she should write again. She tried that one time, and people had even said it was pretty good, but it felt strange to keep trying when here she was, deep in space, a scientist, technically, or a technician, scientifically. Morris had been a writer, and that had been nice, for a few years or so. He had always been very inspirational, even if he did eat all the crisps. And now he was millions of miles away. Space is very strange. She sang to herself a little bit, songs that her mother had sung to her, big, aching ballads about life being impossible. She danced a little more, but it was less fun without the drones. She listed all her friends from school, working out where they were now, what they would probably be up to. In a few hundred days they'd arrive somewhere new, somewhere with a bit of excitement. But for now, the mines flew around the universe extracting what they needed, and it was nice to be doing something useful. Nobody was waiting at the top of the lift when she finally arrived, although the scrappy laminated list confirmed it was Cressida who was on her way down. It was night time, thankfully. She'd been in the dark too long for any kind of sun.
Vivian, thank you so much. So I want to hear more. So will you be continuing to write this piece? Because obviously this is excerpted from a much longer story.
Yeah, so I'm working on it effectively.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit, but I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but I like it.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, no, I've always just been drawn to sci-fi because that's what I read, and I think it's been really great listening to the Commonword stuff, sort of in between these.
Yeah.
And I think because it's that, and which you have that sort of, not a political undertone, but political like facts, and I think just sort of I've been reading stuff like Ursula Le Guin, stuff like Ian M. Banks,
Yeah.
stuff like N.K. Jemisin, in which like that with science fiction as a sort of vehicle for that sort of less direct political stuff, but still something that can be heavy political in that sort of exploration way that, you know, very Ursula Le Guin. But
yeah,
it's been fantastic, and it's been great to share, and I hope that people enjoyed that weird little soliloquy of sorts.
I loved it, and it really struck me as well how I've become really unused to the sound of traffic. And it's like, there it is. But yeah, please keep writing. Please keep working on it, because I'm looking forward to reading the next iteration. Yeah, and you're so right about sci-fi and the things that it's able to hold, and what an interesting container it can be. And yeah, and it has a long history of very political overtones and undertones, and Octavia Butler, and yes. So thank you so much. Yeah. We have another writer who's part of our group, but is not with us tonight, although I'm hoping that they are tuning in. But they've asked if I can read their piece for them, which I'm going to do. It's a short. Okay, so you know how there's all these different words that get used for different types of different forms of literature, and I feel like as a writer that like sometimes that starts to break down a bit. So there's certain pieces of short fiction, you know, they kind of veer into the area of like prose poetry, and what does that mean anyway, and you know. So this is one of those pieces that is I'm not going to try and define it. I'm just going to read it for you, because I think it's doing its own thing. So this is written by CJ. CJ is an LGBTQ plus affirmative psychotherapist, a Buddhist, and a cat dad. They like being in woodlands, and they're interested in making trans power surges happen. Yes. This is their first time sharing their fiction with a wide audience, and you can find them at www.rainorShineTherapy.co.uk. So this is on the reform of the CARE Act by CJ. I gather my routine objects: water, keys, phone, and now mask too. I like to head out in the very early morning when it's completely quiet, apart from the bird song, when no one else is up yet. My route goes through Manly Park, past range desserts where the bins overflow with milk cartons and ice cream tubs used to make shakes and Faluda the day before, the barbershop on the corner. Today in the park, the light is limpid. It makes the air brilliant in its transparency, freshly rinsed. It feels pleasantly cool. I begin to run, and as my feet thud rhythmically on the light gravel, my body warms up and my heart beats faster. The path is a scalene triangle. At one of the angles, a kit of pigeons congregate, pecking at the rice the local takeaway dumps there for them. They scatter as I approach. I may pass another runner, someone with their dog, sometimes an older couple who react more viscerally to my mask, or a young mom pushing a pram with a toddler in tow, running zigzag across the path. Running laps, I pass the same people over and over again. We establish an etiquette for who will get out of the way and how. Divert onto the grass, move to the very side of the path. Whether or not we will make eye contact or blank each other. And so this particular day, after completing 5 or 6 of these laps, I come to a standstill. Whether from the exhaustion, the accumulation of thoughts over the past weeks, the serotonin, I don't know, but a peace suddenly descends in my mind, as if I am oxygen, that weightier part of the air descending to the bottom of the room. A deep silence. A silence of anxieties, of the thoughts that keep the mind looping. I walk over onto the grass and sink down, dropping into the wideness, open to the depths of what is happening to us all. The bird song appears as layers. The insistent syncopated coo of the pigeons, the chirp of the blackbirds, the melodies of chaffinch refract the silence into bands of sound. The notes seem to stretch through the expanse of sky. I notice the dandelions dotted across the field. They are soldiers rising to their feet unkempt. They are carrying delicate time bombs set to go off at any second. Their intense fragility, knowing a gust of wind could take them now, some of them disintegrating already. It is as if they have spent their whole lives trembling on the brink, and yet they're here still, the seeds holding on to each other tight. Unlike the noble poppies who stand tall and announce their aristocratic splashes of red silk across the field, row upon row, the dandelions squat close to the ground. Their stalks are strong and tenacious, their roots run deep. They are a diaspora, they travel light. And when their time has come, they will give themselves freely to the wind in search of another life. And then somehow, the spell fades. A Yorkshire Terrier snuffles around my feet. In the distance, a revving boy racer engine goes vroom and then pop, tires grinding against the ground. Across the park, a man speaks in Polish on his mobile, nursing a tinny in a bag. This world, within this neighborhood, is waking up. Once again. Oh, that's such a gorgeous piece. That is On the Reform of the CARE Act by CJ. And CJ, if you are listening, thank you so much. You know, we've had multiple people moving home and going through really big life changes in the middle of all of this. So like, thank you to you for working through all of the different things that you're juggling, and to all of the writers all of whom are juggling all kinds of things, as all of you listening are, of course. And I also just want to thank and just acknowledge the writers who were part of the group at different points and who haven't been able to be here tonight, or who've had to make decisions about how they're spending their limited time and energy. We're all struggling with all of that right now. And so thank you to you for being part of making this happen as well. And yeah, I think before we come to a close and ask if anyone has got any questions, I'm going to read you two more poems from the archive. Yeah, I'm going to read you two more poems from the archive. So this first poem that I'm going to read is by Celia Roberts, who wrote the Beauty Counter Encounter that you heard a moment ago. This one's called Dear Doctor. The language is this quite violent medical language in this, so I'm just mentioning that in case anyone needs to know, would like to know that in advance. So this is called Dear Doctor, and it's by Celia Roberts. And I'm going to stop my video so that you can see that gorgeous cover of Voices magazine from the summer of '77. Look how far back resistance goes, and then it goes further and further and further. I'm so glad that there are pieces of artwork like this to remind us. So this is Dear Doctor. Why can't I be normal like you? It seems I do not do, I have to be done to. Fumigated and decontaminated, deloused and douched, injected and disinfected, immunized and sterilized, abluted and aborted, castrated and mutilated, tranquilized and electrolyzed and anesthetized and lobotomized, rejected and dissected. And I'm only 23. Won't you just let me be? Why can't I be normal like you? I have one more poem for you. This is written by Saul Garson, and I'm going to read you his biography. He's included it with his poem, and something I noticed in when I was looking back in the archive books, especially in Voices, so going back to the '70s, is a lot of the writers named either their profession or their previous profession or the profession that disabled them and made them unable to work, or their relationship to the economy. And of course, that's something that, you know, if you struggle for money, and if you struggle to be recognized as a human being of value, that can be something that you know, that jumps to the fore, and that's something that you feel you need to mention, and mention with pride. So this is called Joyner's Son. This poem sets my heart on fire. I love this so much, and it speaks to me on a deep level. So this is also, I think, one to read for all of the writers who have been told that you are not clever enough or white enough or educated enough or interesting enough or this enough or that enough to be a writer. So this is for you. Joyner's Son. How dare you write, you Joyner's son, you would-be joiner of words, disjointed, sawn-off phrases, nailed to patterns made by your betters, eyes glued to the shapes turned by those who would turn us away from the things that matter. What terrible chatter, nonsensible patter. A waste of good paper, a waste of good wood that should have been used to make a barrel to carry beer, or make a chair, or light a fire. Or is it such a waste of time? For you who dared to change the world, green as fresh cut timber you may be now. But now has passed, and tomorrow you'll be seasoned and be beautiful, with your multitude of colors, brown, white, black, red. You'll write and be read, you Joyner's son. Write on. And that's by Saul Garson. And I never did read you his biography. I said I was going to, and then I didn't. I'm going to read it to you now. So Saul Garson is a former glass worker, now self-employed joiner. In his 50s, he also paints and carves. communist from a Jewish background. And this was written in the 70s. That brings us to the end of our night and our sharing. So before I check in with Hina to see if anyone has any questions or anything like that, I just want to thank, obviously, I want to thank Hina so much for being the person who initiated this group and who prioritized this group to enable us to get together and to meet and to write and create together. Thank you, Hina, for that, and all of the work that you're doing on the archive. I really, really strongly recommend that everyone gets over to that website. I think Hina's dropped the address into the chat under the Facebook feed. Have a look, and Hina's going to be adding more and more of the archive materials online so that it's accessible. It's very interesting. And thank you, Marion, who has been doing captions for us tonight. It's so appreciated. Thank you for doing that. It makes it much more accessible. And yeah, I really appreciate your work and your support for that. Thank you. And to Commonword more widely, thank you very much. And of course, to the funders of the archive project, the Heritage Lottery Fund, who see and understand and appreciate the value in heritage work and in arts work and in this kind of thing. In us making new things that are inspired by things that have been made in the past. Yeah, thank you. And finally, thank you so much to everyone who's listening and watching. And it's a strange little old gig because we're all sitting in our rooms with our computers and usually we can see each other and smell each other and we're in the same room. And so it's been different, but equally I know that this is accessible to many people in a way that in-person gigs are not. So yeah, it's an interesting new kind of form that we've got open to us. That's all I'm going to say. I've talked enough, more than enough. So I wanted to invite Hina to come back, and also of the writers who are with us tonight, if you feel like you want to open up your video and join us, then you can. If you do not wish to, you do not have to. And yay, there's your lovely faces. And Micah, I know that you're listening in, so you're with us as well. So Hina, yeah, I wanted to ask if you had any questions for any of the writers or about any of the process or anything like that.
Just before I do that, we didn't have any questions in the chat, but just a few, if people are still watching. Len Gertzy said, I love this with the green hearts, lots of 3 claps. Olivia Green, wonderful with the green hearts. And Mikey Barnes, hi to all of you. That was so fascinating. I want to read more. I can't remember at what point that was, but I would say that could have been for any of the pieces, which I absolutely flipping loved. I'm trying not to swear with excitement. But yeah, I just wanted to know, like, if any of you about your kind of, like, a bit about your writer journeys, if that's not too vague a question, and you know how this kind of process has been for you, yeah, and taking part in these workshops. Yeah, do you want me to choose someone to ask, or like would that Alma, would you mind? Because I like, go on. Yeah, and then we can pass it on to other people.
These workshops were incredible because personally I've never found somewhere that was this inclusive and a place where, you know, being trans or non-binary was not something that was a difference, but was like a common ground where we could meet with other people, and also, you know, coming together creatively without that pressure was really great. So I am so thankful that Commonwealth create this, and that, you know, I've met so many incredible people, Mish first of all, and then obviously Mika, CJ, and Vivian, and all the others that couldn't make it tonight. We were such a great team, and it was really sad that we could not meet up, you know, for the last ones, but we still managed to do Zoom calls, so we managed. But this was an incredible experience, and I do really hope that, you know, it's gonna be continued somehow, or there's gonna be something similar, because it would be great to keep having this, you know, safe space where being yourself is not a problem. So yeah.
Thank you. I know, Vivian, you were also thanking us, so thank you, and thanks again to Mish. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add at all. It's all right if you don't.
Yeah, and not much. Yeah, I think I've mostly just done it like on the kitchen table before, but yeah, I just sort of I remember I saw this on a whim, and it's like, oh, that sounds nice, and then yeah, just meeting like such like great group of people who are writing like such different things, you know, just yeah, we only sort of only managed to get out to the Commonword building once or maybe twice, but it was just great. That being there, I didn't know it was there. I've walked past it so many times, but yeah. And as a writer, I don't know. I just write things, and then try and do whatever. But it's been really fantastic.
Okay, thank you. And Micah, if you're there, if you don't want to say anything, that's fine. But I just wanted to give you a chance, just because I can't see you, it doesn't mean you're not there. If you wanted to say anything.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me? No?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, hello. Yeah. No. Kind of echoing what Alma said, I think it was the first time I'd been in a space where you didn't have to explain yourself. You also didn't have to explain what you were writing about so much, or like necessarily why certain characters were the way they were, or why the story is about this. And I think in a lot of well, I haven't been in that many, but in the spaces that I've been in before, you have to spend a lot of your time and energy almost justifying yourself, but also the themes, the characters in your story to people who may not kind of share your experiences. And so to not have to put energy into that and to put it into the writing instead, and me a great privilege. So thanks again.
Okay. Thank you for those words.
I just want to add something actually to what you've said, if that's okay. Yeah, I really hear you and all of you on that point. I think that it's something that I've definitely been conscious of myself as a writer as well. That there are times when I have more and more, in fact, made a decision that I'm centering queer readers. I'm centering trans readers, non-binary readers. There are things in some of the things that I write that is for those readers. And if other readers do not understand that particular reference or miss a certain layer, I actually don't care. I actually don't care. And I, you know, because I think that we get so used to reading, and I think that this is something too that reflects in terms of publishing industry, particularly as in the big publishing houses, that we get so used to reading things that center whiteness, that center straightness, cisness, that center, you know, non-disabled experiences. And so anyone who's outside of that pops up perhaps to, you know, inspire the main character. No, we've read too many of those things. And I've really appreciated being able to talk, you know, as a group about that, and about, you know, Micah, you and I had a conversation about pronouns and how those are used in fiction, and how interesting and challenging it can be to just step outside of you know, what's assumed, and think a little deeper about it. I think that there's yeah, there's just something really special and really important there. And it really, I absolutely love, I love reading work that just centers queer experiences, trans experiences, non-binary experiences. And it's not even necessarily about the things that we're told are our stories. Like, you know, I've read a lot of beautiful coming out stories, but there are other stories as well. Right. So yeah, your writing that you've shared with us tonight, all of you, I think just shows that and shows that and shows that. So yeah, yeah. We contain multitudes, as Walt said. So yeah, that's all for me. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Shall we end this now? Yeah. Thanks again so much, Mish, for hosting, making this all happen. Thank you to all of you. For the rest of you who are watching, yeah, as Mish said, thank you for watching. We will be back again online sometime soon. In the meantime, check out the Commonword Archive website, you know, find yourself in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will see you all very soon. Okay, I'm gonna stop the video now. Hang on, wait. I'll just wait. I'll tell you when it's. Yeah, you can. Yeah, just hide your videos while I stop the video.
This is what my dad does when he's on. I'll just do my dad dance. Good